and that is at the core of feedback. Is it delivered in a way that makes me feel like I hate you, versus, oh, thank you, that is so insightful, I can go be better. And and ultimately it goes back to, are you approaching things with curiosity, are you approaching things with judgment? And once you start approaching things with curiosity, there is a much greater probability that you will end up being helpful in the process, versus judging. But unfortunately, people judge when they are themselves insecure, and I've been through an entire journey myself around this. And I used to be much more judgy when I was a more insecure person. I'm still going through my own journey with it. And as I get more secure, I find myself being curious about every human being who shows up in front of me.
Hey there, folks. Welcome to today's episode of the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. My guest today is Projjal Ghatak. You can call him JJ. He is the CEO and co-founder at Onloop. He was the former head of strategy and international development for Uber, or international business development, Stanford MBA, done a lot of cool stuff. He likes Tiger Woods, and he's doing some cool, exciting things with technology. So, Projjal, thanks for being on the show today.
No, thank you, Anthony. Thank you for having me.
Tell everybody about Onloop and who you are. I can't remember what the question you asked me. Tell me everything that encompasses your life, and we'll get into some questions.
No, so I started Onloop about 3.5 years ago, taking sort of all of my life experiences as a manager and a leader, to try and fundamentally rethink how goals and feedback gets done in organizations. In my experience, OKR systems or performance management systems felt like a lot of bureaucratic form filling, and a lot of time and effort taken to do things, but unclear what the benefits were. But goals and feedback are two of the most important things for high performance. And I saw the way they were implemented in organizations seem kind of backward, and for the purposes of applying compliance processes rather than driving productivity. And so we sort of built our own proprietary framework and approach that we call collaborative team development, and a generative AI powered application that forms the right habits around goals and feedback in orgs we work with.
Cool. I love that. And what I think is cool about it, from the little I know about your background, is you've built this software, you've built this product, you've built this approach, but it's also on the back of angel investing, having, like I said, your MBA, working in these high performance organizations that are driven by metrics, they're driven by data, and they're driven by good decision making, so that you can inform best practice. And so, given the fact that you're using AI to use this tool and you're pulling information, tell me about the concept of a capture and how a capture is important to support organizational performance. And you might have to explain what it means as well.
Yeah, so let me try and answer that through a sporting analogy, right? So if you're a coach watching a play in any sport, you're making quick observations of what's happening, and then when you helping your team get better at halftime or in timeouts, then you're using those observations to then think about what people can do better in the future. The same applies to the workplace, but unfortunately, we've not made it easy to capture those observations, and then generate insights from it. And one of the power of applied AI or generative AI is taking unstructured observations and then extracting insights from it, right? So, so say you have a colleague whose name is Mark, and you're like, "What do you think of Mark?" Right? Everybody has an opinion on people, right? So like, Mark shows up on time. He's really diligent. Sometimes he doesn't always grasp things right away, but he tries really hard. Right, and that's an observation people have. Now, there's a lot of nuggets of useful feedback embedded in it for Mark, in terms of what Mark does well, which we call celebrates, and what Mark can do better. And so what we can do through technology is just capture much more regular observations that people have on themselves, their direct reports, their peers, and convert that into structured feedback that is actually beneficial for the person to improve over time. And so, in the same way that cell phones and address books made sure that we didn't have to remember phone numbers and you just could put in an address book, we strongly believe that we won't have to teach people how to do feedback. We can take people's observations and convert them to feedback. And the same thing with goals and how goals get broken down. So, like, a CEO might be like, I want to triple revenue next year, right? They know that as a goal. Now, how that gets broken down into a 500-person org and what each person then does to triple revenue, much harder problem. And typically, companies don't have a problem setting audacious goals or setting strategic direction. Where they struggle is how that gets converted to how it trickles into the deeper parts of the org. And these are all age-old problems. None of these problems are new or haven't existed. And why I think generative AI is so powerful as technology is because it allows us to rethink age-old problems in a brand new way, which is very different from a movement like crypto or blockchain. Because I think crypto and blockchain goes off an opportunity to try and run things a particularly new way. But if you think about the crypto blockchain movement, they're sort of rebuilding all of the infrastructural pieces from the past. And it's not always fully clear what the standout benefit is. But with generative AI, we're being able to do things in brand new ways. And, it continues to blow my mind every day. Like, I was recording a demo video yesterday, and for that, before I would need a scriptwriter and an editor and a video maker, and now I can just do all of it myself. And that's incredibly powerful. So now I veered a little bit, but captures are basically observations, and sort of taking observations to form a fuller picture of an organization, and to provide the insights needed to make the organization better.
Awesome. I mean, that's helpful. And what I think there's a lot of intersectionality in terms of the conversation is one is the upside possibility of AI and its application distinct from a shiny object or building something like brand new, like having decentralized ledgers within your business is like a nice to have versus a must have, whereas being able to get 10x productivity by leveraging software or automating information capture that at the best of times people don't like doing. Like, I think that's cool. But I also, from your business standpoint, and of course I want to talk to you and learn more about Onloop, but for our managers and leaders who are responsible for driving strategy, it's a pain in their ass. They don't know how to track goals distinct from objectives. Two, they think that the act of asking people information is onerous and subjective. Meanwhile, they have goals and objectives like increase revenue. That one's easy, but make it a great place to work, like have a great culture. For certain organizations, like in the medical field, they want to actually know if their outcomes are actually delivering.
Yeah.
But their individual computational power is limited, and then AI and or your software or tools or things like yours can help them do that. So I guess my question is, and I'll ask from your experience as the CEO of Onloop, you've been rolling this out with teams. How is the change management going? Like, given that it is a phase change of an existing activity, are they accepting it? Are people getting it? Is it as easy as an adoption of as like an iPhone? What's worked and what's been a challenge?
Yeah. So actually, nobody ever uses the term change management for consumer products, but they always use the term change management for enterprise or company products. And usually embedded in that is that you need change management when people don't want to do something and you're trying to make them do something different. Right. And that's when you need change management. So what we've tried really hard to do is really find ways to, how do you minimize that sort of friction, right, in organizations? Because typically, if people don't want to do something, you start off at a negative. And then no matter how positive things are, it takes a hurdle. And actually, one place we take a lot of inspiration from is fitness, and how both fitness trackers and products like the Aura Ring and the Whoop Band have made fitness tracking sexy, versus saying go to your annual health checkup and like do a chore to go build that out, and what products like Barry's and F45 have done with working out, versus like Soul Cycle and spinning. And so we try and make the process of goal alignment and feedback as fucking fun as possible, right? And that goes to, can we give managers a really simple way to think about how they drive high performance in their teams? And we believe that we've mystified what being a good manager is, what being a good leader is. And because we've taken a very product-based approach to it, our job is to demystify it. And we believe that every team member has 5 hierarchical needs. And it's every manager's job to manage those 5 needs hierarchically. At the foundation of it is the person motivated, right? And motivation can get affected by a variety of things. We call it energy, right? So it's like, how full is your battery? And your battery might be not full because you have a newborn and not getting any sleep. Or your battery may not be full because your boss yells at you, right? Like for whatever reason. But understanding where someone's battery level is and how motivated they are to show up sits at the very base of productivity. Every manager's job is to understand where that is and to keep that at a decent level, or tell the person to go recharge or refill the battery. The second layer is goals, right? Does this person understand what targets, projects, and skills they need to achieve to be successful for the individual, and then what the company needs? And typically, if most managers just did these 2 things, i.e., kept a person motivated and made it very darn clear what the person needs to achieve and how, that would solve actually 80% of productivity problems in the world, right? And so we tell people, if you have a low performer, only focus on those 2 things. And then the way you sustain performance is through our 3 next layers. So one is celebrate feedback, not only to recognize people, but to help people understand what their superpowers are. Because when someone knows these are 3 to 5 things I do really well, they figure out how to solve their goals using those superpowers. And then the next 2 layers are about ongoing development. So a constructive feedback layer in terms of what can you do better. And actually, constructive feedback is much more valuable for high performers than low performers. And managers tend to do the opposite. They give low performers a lot of constructive feedback, and they give high performers no constructive feedback. It's like, you're doing a great job. Like, keep doing what you're doing. But what that person actually craves is ways they can get better. And then the last final layer is that person learning and growing, and do they think they're developing? And there is no point focusing on someone's learning and growth if they're not motivated to act and can't get the basic job function done. And there's an inherent hierarchy to those 5 things. And we found through our work that we are very laser focused on how do we convert every manager into a great manager. Like that's sort of how we look at it, right? And then it's not about, how do I make you fill up these goal documents and forms and do feedback, etc. It is a program to transform you as a person and a manager. And so that then feels much more exciting versus change management, right? Or performance management. Like, there is such a huge problem with the term performance management, because there are a billion knowledge workers in the world. All of them want to be developed and be productive. None of them want to be performance managed. And so if you call it cultural transformation versus change management, it changes how people show up, right? So I think language matters, and how sexy something feels matters. And we're trying to make goals and feedback sexy and not a chore, like our predecessors through the software and systems they've built have made it out to be. And if the only gym in town is a moldy gym that stinks, you're going to have an obese population because they're not going to work out, right? So then you can't blame the people. They're like, these people are lazy and they don't work. I'm like, no, you've given them shit gyms. They're not going to work out. Give them a good gym, and they might be excited to work out. So and we spent a lot of time really thinking about what motivates people to act. And it's not rocket science, and it's happened in other industries, and we're trying to adopt it to sort of productivity practices in the workplace.
So, I mean, I think that's first of all. There's so much in those 5 steps, and like if you're listening, of course you're listening. You're still here. Go back and listen to those. I think the motivator piece of like getting people not to be inspired, and again, I'm being really intentional about the words because change management for certain things is very applicable. Performance management in that case, tracking goals. People hear about OKRs and all of that stuff, and it's like, oh, you have to update the tracker. Whereas it's like, hey, you want to be able to support people. And you asked me earlier, how did I become a strategy consultant from being a waiter? My hypothesis was that there's going to be a bunch of old people that have been in leadership roles, and technically old, baby boomers, that are going to create gaps. And there's going to be folks who don't have business degrees, who never learned how to manage, but are technically good. And so you have that skills gap, and then something like this to be like, hey, you don't need to figure out, you don't need to have an MBA, you don't need to go to take every strategy course, although you can enroll in our strategy course, but, just walk 10,000 steps or gamify the ability to do that. And then the feedback piece, people hate talking. But I will say one of the things that I found to be true, and I'd be interested to see your perspective, is the difference between qualitative and quantitative. It's like, hey, are you looking at the person or are you looking at the process? And I find that people are way more receptive when you can bring it back to some concrete data, because that it's objective versus you're doing good or you're not doing good, which is subjective. How have you found that experience to be true? Not necessarily as a CEO, but within all the other work that you've done.
No, that's very spot on, right? So all good feedback is one, direct and kind, and it is specific to behaviors, right? Telling someone you're doing a good job is as useless as telling someone you suck, right? Because then you're making a statement about the person, and it's not something you can do anything about. And we all have superpowers and blind spots. Everybody, right? Including the greatest leaders and the greatest managers and the greatest CEOs. So having superpowers and blind spots is innately human to everyone. And a job of a manager is to, through feedback, be specific around what those superpowers and blind spots are. So being able to connect dots on the fly is a superpower. Attention to detail could be a superpower or a blind spot. Delivering inspirational presentations is a superpower, right? Being verbose and rambly like I am sometimes is a blind spot, right? So and then you can get very specific around changing that. But someone once said to me, I remember this. I met a guy, and I was quite, when I talk about things I'm excited about, I get rambly. And he went and told one of my investors that, I met this guy, but he's like this like parable of a Silicon Valley character who like just keeps yapping all the time. And that was just like inconsiderate, right? And there was no reason to put it that way. And I immediately hated this guy for the rest of my life. But there are people who are including my wife, and I started a newsletter last week, who are like, listen, when you get excited, you start saying a lot of things and you lose your audience because they're not following you the same way. And if you are crisper around your messaging, you're going to have a better impact on your audience. And that is much more encouraging for me to catch myself on when I'm rambling and get crisper. And actually, the experience both people have with me is the same, but they find a better way of communicating it back, so it's motivational to the person to act on. And that is at the core of feedback. Is it delivered in a way that makes me feel like I hate you, versus, oh, thank you, that is so insightful, I can go be better.
Yeah.
And ultimately it goes back to, are you approaching things with curiosity? Are you approaching things with judgment? And and once you start approaching things with curiosity, there is a much greater probability that you will end up being helpful in the process, versus judging. But unfortunately, people judge when they are themselves insecure, and I've been through an entire journey myself around this. And I used to be much more judgy when I was a more insecure person. I'm still going through my own journey with it. And as I get more secure, I find myself being curious about every human being who shows up in front of me. And and that's a much better way to live, frankly. And I'm a happier person as a result of it. Again,
Yeah.
I deviated.
No, I think it's interesting because at the end of the day, making management sexy or making managers, turning every manager into a great manager, those are the things like that you need to consider. And, as a CEO of a professional development practice, strategy practice, we have those experiences all the time. I
Yeah.
think one of the things that you said that was, I don't know if the word is telling, but just honest about yourself is like, if you don't have your side of the street clean, if you don't have your shit together, it's really hard to come from a place of integrity to support someone else because you have no leg to stand on. I think that curiosity piece of like being really interested in people and interested to support them is the distinction between good leaders and good managers and bad ones, because you're actually getting there. And then we joke internally, you're allowed to have one flaw. So my one
Yeah.
flaw is that I ask a question and then another question over a question, and that's my one flaw. And if your flaw is you ramble from time to time, that's okay. I will take an opportunity to shout out my friend Micah, who does Clifton Strengths Assessments, and he does it for our clients. And what I think is super aligned with what he shares is by understanding people's superpowers and their Clifton strengths in this case, you move away from judgment to understanding. And I think that's at the heart of everything that you're saying is by better understanding from a depth and call it empathy perspective, that you can be a better leader, and tools that can give you data so that you're better grounded in your decision making will only help. So I know we could talk about this for a long, long time. Projjal, where can people learn more about your company? Where can they learn more about you? Where can they connect? And where can they just link up with you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is where I mostly live from a social network perspective, and so searching for Onloop or searching for JJ Ghatak should find me pretty easily. And if you want to find out more about the company, onloop.com is probably the best resource. And I really like hearing from people, and so if anything I said touched a chord in a good way or a bad way, like feel free to reach out. And all feedback is a gift, and so I love hearing from listeners.
Yeah, and given that all feedback is a gift, equipping your managers with an opportunity and a tool to get feedback from people. He didn't pay me to say that. I'm happy to do it because it's so critical. People just don't have a good enough system to get something good, user friendly, and make it easy to be a manager. It's a hard job. It's a sucky job at times, and help make it easier for them. So, Projjal, thank you for taking the time. Projjal's calling from Singapore today. I'm in Vancouver, so we've got different time zones, but I really appreciate you making the time. It was a blast. I wish you guys nothing but success with your work, and I do look forward to connecting again. So, thanks for being here.
Of course. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for having me.
Folks, my guest today, Projjal Ghatak, who is the CEO and co-founder of Onloop. One of the things to take away, amongst many other things, is, to make it easier to solicit feedback, to make management, call it sexy. Nobody wants to be change managed. Nobody wants to be performance managed, but people do want to help others. So how can you recontextualize the intent of what you're doing to help people be fit as managers, and using a tool like Onloop or others is a great place to start so that you can, break that change management piece. So thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. This was a really, really fun episode because it gets to the heart of human performance and behavioral things and numbers. And then also equally excited about the possibility of AI to give your team greater computing power. So thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. Connect with JJ on the internet. My name's Anthony Taylor. This has been the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. Subscribe if you haven't. Add us on YouTube. And I'll see you next time.
Thanks, Anthony.